Hello cross stitchers, Stacy here. This video is going to be a cross stitch help video on the technique of parking. If you looked up this video by the word parking, then you already probably know what it is and you're just trying to find out different ways of going about it. And we will go over all of those ways, but if you are a beginner to cross stitch, you will not need to know this technique until you get to pieces that are larger, full coverage, and have a lot of color changes going on. So typically, whenever you first start out cross stitch, and most of your cross stitch patterns are going to be a method that is called cross-country stitching. Now, cross-country stitching is where you would take one color, you would do all the stitches in that color in that area, and then you would move on to another color, same thing, and so on and so on. Most of them also start in the middle of the pattern by folding your fabric in half twice and finding the center of your fabric and starting in the center of the pattern and working your way out. I do have two examples of the cross-country stitching here on my cart, and this is just to show examples of what you would types of patterns that you would use cross-country stitching on, which would be most patterns. As you can see, like with this one, I would do all of the color of purple in her hair, and then I'd move on to another color of purple in her hair. I would do like this purple up in here and go around here, and not necessarily start here and then fill in everything as you go. That is more of a parking. I have one more example of cross-country stitching. And as you can see, I do have one of the colors still threaded here on my needle, but same type of thing. You can see that some of the dark blue has been done, some of the yellow has been done, but I'm not stitching every color and then coming out this direction. I'm doing all of the yellow in this area of the cross stitch, all of the dark blue in this area of the cross stitch at once. The color that I have still in my needle was down here, it was up here, it was here, and I'm working on it here. So that will be mostly what you do whenever you're cross stitching. But when you come along a pattern that is larger in scale, full coverage, a lot of color changes, a lot of confetti, which basically means like one stitch of this color, 3 stitches of this color, then 4 stitches of another color, and then 1 stitch. You'll do more of like a parking type method. Now, parking is traditionally very by the book, and that's why, you know, cross-country stitching being over here on this end of the spectrum, parking being over here on this end of the spectrum, what works best for me is something kind of in the middle where I intermingle both methods into my stitching. This is an example of kind of what I do. Right now I'm in between sections, so whenever I get into another area on this pattern, let's say the next area I work is down here, I will take all these threads that I have parked in the fabric and I will stitch all of that color in this whole area here with all of these threads, and then I'll go in and fill in the other colors that I didn't have parked, and then I will fill in the one that has the most stitches in this area so that on the back it covers a lot of loose ends and threads. So that's my mixture of the two methods there. But typically, traditional parking is exactly 10 by 10 by 10 by 10 by 10, and then you just go about it in this direction regardless of if the next 10 by 10 square has the same color that you have on your needle right now. And I'll go over that, and then I'll go over how I kind of intermingle the two. But something that's very large, has every single space filled with a stitch, this is something that you would use parking for. You want to save your colors for later instead of tying them off every time. And the method keeps you from having to do as much counting with your stitches. If you were to try to stitch something that like this with cross-country stitching, then you would be doing a lot of counting. So this kind of keeps you from having to do as much of that. So the pattern that I'm doing for this video specifically, I am doing it on a scrap piece of fabric, Aida fabric, which is larger than what I would stitch this pattern on, it being a large pattern and full coverage, a lot of stitching going on. I'm actually in reality going to do it on 22 count, but for the purposes of this video, I really needed something that was larger so you could see what I was doing. So this is just going to be for this specific video. This is not something that I'm going to continue stitching and use in the future, because if I were to do it on 14 count Aida, it would be absolutely massive. Throughout the video, I will speed up parts so that you don't have to watch the whole thing, or else this video would be an hour long, and we aren't going to do that. So, okay, advanced stitchers, this is a few different methods on parking threads and the parking technique. Enjoy. Okay, I already have my scrap piece of fabric hooped up. You probably, on a piece that was going to be really large though, want to use a Q-snap frame, which is square or rectangle. Typically, whenever you're doing the traditional method of parking, you would start in a 10 by 10 square and then work to the next one, next one, next one, and then loop back around and come this direction, working 10 by 10 squares, so on and so forth, just like that. You will have some that start in the 10 by 10 square up here, go this direction and then diagonal, this direction and then diagonal, this direction, diagonal. You would typically want to start at the top of a pattern rather than at the bottom corner of a pattern, just because whenever you park your threads, then if you were parking your threads going upwards, with gravity, they're going to come back down and they'll be in your way. So you do kind of want to park them to where your threads are going downwards with gravity and they aren't getting in your way quite as much. You can start in the bottom corners, you can start on the bottom row, whatever, but normally you would start at the top with the first 10 by 10 and they will have it numbered on your pattern. Another way that you can do parking is if you were to do it in diagonals, and if you were to do this method, then you would come in and do this section first, and then you would come down this direction, do all of this, park your threads as you go, and then go up this one, down this one. So same type of concept. You're going to park your threads in that next section. As you go down this previous section, you're going to park your threads in the following section. Same thing with this method. If you were going to go across, down this way, then as you come across, you're going to, as you stitch this 10 by 10 square, you're going to park your threads in this one. As you stitch this one, you're going to park your threads in this one. And same thing for if you were to do the 10 by 10 squares, but do them in a diagonal form. Instead of doing the diagonal lines, you would do this 10 by 10 square, park your threads over here. This 10 by 10 square, park your threads down in this area. This 10 by 10 square, park your threads here. And that's how you would go about it. So same type of thing. You're going to start small and then work your way whatever direction you plan on going with your parked threads. The first color that I'm going to start with on this pattern is going to be this black box. So right now I'm just highlighting all of this so you can see it well. I'm going to stitch these highlighted stitches real quick for you. You'll start your first stitch in the top corner, and that is going to be at least leaving 2.5 inches, 3 inches, preferably margins on your fabric. Okay, I have now stitched all of the area that I highlighted here. And as for this symbol, my parked stitch then is going to be right there. I do all of my crosses from the bottom left to the top right, and then crossed from the bottom right to the top left. So in order to park my stitch, I am just going to bring it up on the bottom left, because that's the direction I do all my stitches, and then I am going to leave it right there. I'm not going to stitch any more of that color. And I've marked my parked stitch with the green highlighter. Now the next color that I'm going to get is going to be this little triangle here, and I'm going to go ahead and get that on my needle. I'm stitching those 2 triangle symbol stitches. I do have to deal with a little knot that shows up there. That's just the name of the game. Here's that symbol again. That's the closest one to where I'm at right now. Do I want to park it there? Yes. So I've done my 2 stitches there, and now I'm going to bring it down here to park it right here. So that's going to be right on the last stitch. And I'm parking in the bottom left corner again, as I do with all my stitches, because whenever I make this stitch, I will bring it up just like that. And I'm going to mark that with my green highlighter. Okay, now next I'm going to do this in. The next spot that the in occurs, we have 2 in this 10 by 10 block, as you can see there, and then it occurs over here right beside where we just are. So it'll be really easy to park because it's right beside where we are. And I'm gonna go ahead and fill in this 10 by 10 square by doing this method. Now this symbol here, mark it so you can see it, is only that one stitch. It is nowhere in this 10 by 10. It's nowhere in this 10 by 10. It is in this one, but it's way down here. So I'm going to just do the one stitch and then be done with my thread. Now, I'm not going to park it because I have nowhere to park it. Traditional parking, I keep saying traditional, but I don't know how any other way to explain it. But with parking, if you are doing it the exact 10 by 10 by 10, then you will do the one stitch. Whenever you're ready to end a thread, you will bring it outside of the area that you're stitching, as long as it's going to be covered on the back of your fabric by more stitches that you're about to do. If I were on the very edge of my 10 by 10 block and I wanted to end a thread, I would take it past the next 10 by 10. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to pull it through that 11th stitch, or that 11th row. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to cut it fairly short, not really short, but fairly short, because we aren't going to use it again. And then whenever I stitch this area right in here, it will cover the back. It'll tuck that tail in, and then whenever I'm completely done with my 10 by 10 that I'm working on right now, I can bring those threads out from the back and snip them. Most people would make a row going down like this where they bring all of their threads that they need to snip. And that's fine, but in order to save on floss, this is the reason that doing complete parking and no cross country, I feel like is kind of a waste of floss. Because once you get going, you have a lot of floss behind your fabric. Whereas with cross country, you have the very minimal amount. With parking, you have a maximum amount of floss behind your fabric. But that's how those tails get tucked in. Now, whenever I'm doing my mixture of cross country and parking, what I do is I'll do that one stitch, and then whenever I go to the back, I'll just thread my needle through those stitches that I've already done and go ahead and cut my tail and not have to worry about it. So that's a couple of differences. You do what works best for you. This is how you're supposed to do it with parking. I prefer to go ahead and tie off the back of my thread, but we'll leave it like this for the sake of this tutorial. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and finish I don't need to mark anything in green over here because there are no stitches in this color. I'm just going to snip the end whenever I get there. I'm going to go ahead and finish my 10 by 10 square. Now that we have this entire 10 by 10 block done, and we have parked all of the stitches that we need to park, you can see that they're marked in green, and we are going to work this 10 by 10 block next. I did the parking down here because if you were doing the method where you do this one, and then diagonal down, up, then you would want those stitches parked there. They aren't going to be messed with or touched while you're stitching this one over here. And this is the reason that a lot of people like this other method of going on the diagonal, because it's more common that your colors would spread this way on a pattern than they would spread this way, just because of coloring. So what you're going to do in order to stitch this next 10 by 10, you're going to take all of those parked stitches over here. You're going to bring these ones down. A lot of people will roll them up to get rid of them, get them out of the way. You might want to put a needle minder on there or some sort of something to keep them steady. I'll just stick a needle minder there, Little Mermaid. And all of these stitches that are parked, remember we had that short one that we cut? We can now, because on the back, from finishing that 10 by 10 square, the back of that now has been tucked in, and we can now cut that. I'm going to bring it through here and cut it. That tail is done, and that color is done for the time being anyway. Alright, now that we've moved on to this square, what we're going to do is take all these parked stitches, we're going to move them this direction, and we're going to start with the one who is furthest over, which is this one. This happens to be this one right here. So then you would work this color, and you would work your way this direction. Second, you would do this one. Third, you would do this one, and so on and so forth until you have stitched all of your parked threads. Any symbols that are in this 10 by 10 square that haven't been parked previously, you would go ahead and stitch those. And we're going to park them down here in this area. You could park them over here too. Anything that's going to be the next one that you work, or one that's going to be out of your way. And that's how parking works. Now working this second 10 by 10 square, you can see that it is time consuming. I've sped it up. I'm working all my parked colors that I had. And removing your needle and changing colors so often, even though it minimizes on the amount of counting that you're having to do, in most cases you're counting less than 11 spaces because you're only working in 10 by 10 spaces. But it still is more time consuming than if you were to pick a larger section, let's say 1,000 stitches or 800 stitches, all the same type of color, and doing a mixture of cross country and parking, which is what I do on this piece here. As you can see, like similar colored areas, I will do all the stitches in that area using cross country and parking to the next section that has similar colors. This cuts back on time a lot because you aren't changing your needle as often. So that is the basic parking method to intermingle the two, cross country as well as parking together in order to fill in more of your space. Although it's not that perfect straight line and you're working your way down the fabric, or that perfect diagonal and you're working your way this way, you're doing bits and pieces like large sections. It still works. It still minimizes on the counting. It still keeps you in one area of this large pattern that you would otherwise be a little overwhelmed by because it's focusing on a smaller section of it. Now there is an app that is called Pattern Keeper that will help you along with this. It basically has your pattern on it. If you're doing a large item such as a Heaven and Earth Designs, which is what most of these full coverage pieces are going to be. If you don't know what Heaven and Earth Designs is, go check it out. And if you ever see on Instagram or hear on FlossTube somebody talking about a HAED or a HAED, it's actually HAED because it's HAED, Heaven and Earth Designs. They are very, very large scale parking technique type of cross stitch patterns. Go check them out, as well as check out the Pattern Keeper app. It is off of Google Play. They don't have an Apple version for it yet, but it's an Android app and it is off Google Play. Now, I plan on doing a video on that sometime, who knows when, but sometime I will be doing a video on the Pattern Keeper app and just how to use it and how to navigate through it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was helpful. And again, as always, I am not the know-all be-all for any of the crafts that I do on my YouTube channel or on my Instagram account. This is just so that hopefully I can help some people out as well as possibly entertain some people. And I know that with the sun behind me in this curtain and the dead poinsettia over there and just things surrounding me and all of this that's going on this video, sorry it was visual overload. But yeah, whenever you're doing cross stitching, especially a lot of color changes, a lot of floss changes going on, you are surrounded by stuff. Now, you don't have to be surrounded by a dead poinsettia, but I'm trying to keep it till its last ninth life. If you're interested in more beginner videos to advanced videos like this one is, then I do have a playlist on my YouTube channel that is for cross stitch tutorials and help. Tips, tricks, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so go check that out. This video will be in that playlist as well. And if you'd like to subscribe to me, you can hit subscribe below and ring that little bell whenever I post a video. You will get a notification, and that way you know whenever I post a video almost immediately. All right, I guess that's it. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe.